righty, welcome back from the episode of Two Plane Sports. Oklahoma is coming off of a heartbreaking loss. Sounds like, not shocking, saying that for the sixth time this year. OU has fallen to their opponent. They fell down to 6-6, finished 500 for the year. Definitely a lot of ups and a lot of downs this season. Not great. But we have some thoughts. We're going to recap the Texas Tech game. Obviously, very entertaining. It didn't end the way that we were hoping it to. So we got some thoughts on the offense, on the defense overall, and then we're also going to be talking coaching. I mean, could someone be leaving? Who are some potential targets that OU could be looking at to bolster the offense and the defense, or one or the other? So we're going to go through that, and then we're going to recap our bets. Jose's hot as ever. Fade him at your own risk. Fade me. I am cold as can be. So we'll recap that at the end of the video. But before we get into it, just want to say we appreciate it. We're over 5,200 subscribers. We're knocking on the door 5,300, moving right that way. So please hit the subscribe button. If you've been here before, if you're new here, when you hit the subscribe button, it helps us out a lot. It's free, easy. Like the video, comment on the video, and be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, and Spotify. Twitter and Instagram have been going really well. So we really appreciate you guys on there. If you haven't already gone onto there, go check it out. All right. So obviously, Oklahoma ended up losing Saturday night to Texas Tech 51-48. It was a track meet. Not much defense. It was an odd night. The stadium wasn't very full out in Lubbock. They were throwing tortillas on the field. As we talked about in the pregame preview video, weird things happen in Lubbock. It wasn't the full Lubbock experience considering, the stadium wasn't totally full, but it's still weird out there. And obviously Oklahoma ended up losing. Put up a ton of points. The defense couldn't stop anyone. Jose, what are some initial thoughts and takeaways from this game that you want to start off with?
Well, the defense didn't play very good. Whatever momentum they had in the last two games, it's like it completely went away. The first quarter, I think they did well. They looked like the defense that we had seen especially during Bedlam. They were getting stops, they were tackling well, they were aggressive. I mean, the first play of the game, Jordan Kelly blew up the offensive line and was able to force a fumble. I thought that was just a tone setter and that it was just going to get better from there. It got worse somehow. And look, when we were doing our preview last week, and I know it wasn't on Friday, we didn't have a Friday video, so it was a little bit far ahead. But one of the main things we mentioned was that Tech is a very hard team to beat it in Lubbock. Almost impossible. The only team that's done it was Baylor this year. And they were able to hold them to 17 points. That's the lowest point total they were held to at home. They had never scored less than 30, and Oklahoma needed to score a lot to have a chance at winning, which we did. And we did have a chance at winning, but they weren't able to capitalize. The third loss, but with a 3-point margin for the year. So it's literally a game of inches. I think I'm not even going to reiterate all the refereeing stuff because we tweeted it out a lot and it was blatant. Now, there were, clearly sometimes where Oklahoma benefited from it because at least with the offensive line, I'm sure that there were some holdings. There's always holdings, and they didn't really ever call holding throughout the game. Now, the PIs were ridiculous, but again, I'm not going to go too much further into that. I think the biggest thing is that the linebackers and something, if you guys can rewatch the Tech game and then rewatch the Bedlam game, watch the linebackers and how much they communicate during Bedlam and how they shift so quickly. They get the defensive line to shift. They put themselves in the right spot to either set the edge or get on their assignment. During the Tech game, outside of the first quarter and even halfway through the first quarter, that communication was pretty much non-existent. I don't know if it's because it was an away game and they're trying to keep everything just to hand signals and be ready because Texas Tech was going to run a little faster and they were trying to anticipate that, or if they were just so out of rhythm that they were laser focused on one thing and completely forgot about the communication aspect. Because to me, how much they communicated at Bedlam is why I think they did so well. They were constantly talking amongst each other, to each other, trying to communicate the calls, getting the defensive line in the right spot, and then filling in the gaps where they needed to be. This time, that wasn't the case. I think David Aguegu is too slow to keep being put in those situations. He needs to either be on the edge or just a rotational guy, and that'll be a next year situation because this year that wasn't a possibility with the lack of depth and experience linebacker. But man, is he slow! It's painfully slow sometimes, and I get that he's probably exhausted, but so is the rest of the team, and I really don't think the exhaustion is going to him being less exhausted will make him any faster at this point. I I mean, I don't know. It was also weird that Deshaun White never really came in to help rush, and when he did, it was always just through the gaps. It wasn't through the outside. The one time he did, he messed up bad. He got faked out, I guess, by the quarterback, but he had him. I don't know why he didn't just try to wrap him up or at least trip him up so that the other guys can try to finish tackle for him. But clearly the defense didn't do well. Tackling was poor again, but man, it just the little things, right? And if I said it last week, if the defense can't play together, they're gonna mess up. They played together during Bedlam, and they did not play together this time. Key Lawrence did well though. He was rocket coming out of the back, coming up from the top safety position on some of those tackles. So we'll see if he can come back next year and help.
And you're right, because you're talking about how the defense started. I think it was like 4 minutes left in the first half. It was 24-6. And it's like, okay, I mean, that's pretty solid. Can't complain. I mean, you played nearly a half and you've only allowed 6 points. And then the wheels fell off in the last like 4 minutes. OU allowed what was it, like 17 unanswered to get it to be 24-23 going into halftime. And it's just mind-boggling. And part of that was also I'm trying to remember, didn't Dylan Gabriel throw an interception there right before the end of the half, or they turned the ball over, and then the defense had to go back on the field and they went and scored again. I just wonder if the problem that it seems like with this team, the problem is the confidence. As soon as their confidence gets a little, I don't know, a little rocky, they just start panicking. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's they're not believing in themselves or what, because I'm double checking right here. Yeah, so Texas Tech scored a touchdown on a 10-play drive to cut it to 24-13. And then Dylan Gabriel threw an interception at the OU 20, and then Tech scored again. And I think at that point, when they allowed a touchdown, threw a pick, got back on the field and allowed another touchdown, it was just they just lost their heads. And I don't know why. I haven't ever really seen a team where they can start so good and then just fade. And I don't know if it's because they're exhausted and they're hurt and it's just a culmination of this entire season and they're just not believing in themselves, or if there's more to it. I don't know. So it seemed like everything was going well, but as I was watching that game, I was like, it's 24-6. This means nothing. It's like this game is far from over, because we've seen this script before, and it was the week before against Oklahoma State, but the defense was able to stand tall because they kept getting after Spencer Sanders, but for whatever reason we just couldn't get after Texas Tech, and the wheels fell off. So that was frustrating, of course. And then as soon as they scored that and to cut it 24-20, I knew we were in trouble, or at least it's going to be a close game. So the defense didn't play well, but I will shift the offense. The offense played pretty darn good. I mean, when you score 48 points, you can't. I mean, that's winning football. Now were there times during the game where I felt like Jeff Levy might have shot himself in the foot? Yeah, like you talk about the refs, that spot where Eric Gray, it looked like he had the first down and ended up being 4th and inches. And then they hurry up and go Mach 3 and try to run it. And then they get stuffed. I mean, like, take a second, let them measure at least and see where you are, and then maybe review it. Just certain little details like that kind of add up. And then, you go to the overtime and the whole Philly special or whatever that they ran. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around. I get the trick play and all that stuff, but Dylan Gabriel is your best quarterback by far. Why are you putting him in a position to get walloped? And I mean, he got hit hard. I mean, he was like a lame duck just running out there. So it's just things like that. It's just like, you're rolling, you're scoring. Why are we getting cute? And I feel like sometimes he overthinks and he might need some guidance there. But I mean, at the end of the day, they threw up 672 yards. They scored 48 points. You can't complain. Dylan Gabriel played extremely well. He ended up he went 28 for 40, 449 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 pick. I mean, at that point, you should win. And Eric Gray, what did he run for, like $162 or something like that? Can't complain. And looking at the season as a whole with Dylan Gabriel, you would think that he's been absolutely horrendous the way he's played. And while at times he's been up and down, and I totally understand he has not been perfect, he has had 2,925 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 picks, and he has rushed for a handful of touchdowns. He's rushed for 5. So he's been accounted for 29 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and he missed a full game, and he missed half of the TCU game. So he didn't even play all 12 games. And, he wasn't bad. I mean, he was solid as can be. And I want to, just for comparison, Max Duggan, I know he didn't play too much in his first game against Colorado. So he played in 11 games, basically, just like Dylan Gabriel. He's thrown for 3,070 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 3 picks. He ran for 5 more. So he accounted for 34 touchdowns compared to Dylan Gabriel's 29. And he's thrown for little over 100 yards more. And he's had a couple interceptions less than Dylan Gabriel. The quarterback play has not been bad. That's just a measuring stick of TCU as a team has been better. And Max Duggan hasn't had to be the hero. And he's just had to be good. And if Dylan Gabriel doesn't have to be the hero, he is good. I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I agree. And I think that was established like midway through the season, right? I think going into the year, all of us included, our expectations were pretty high because we didn't really account for like the losses that we had in regards to the draft. I think we were all just so focused on the hatred that we had towards Lincoln Riley still at the beginning of the season, Caleb Williams leaving, Mario Williams leaving, and Latrell leaving. I think those were the only guys that went to USC player-wise. We had other transfers, but we didn't think about the defensive guys that we needed to backfill. You can't just replace a Nick Benito. You can't replace an Isaiah Thomas or a Perrion Winfrey. Those guys played a lot of football at the college level and were good at it. You're not just going to get the same production out of first-year starters. And we didn't think about that, which was our fault. I mean, last year we had a superhero, a Superman in Caleb Williams, and you're seeing him do the exact same thing at USC. That dude is going to be the number 1 overall pick when his time comes. Dylan Gabriel is not that. Dylan Gabriel is not a Heisman finalist quarterback. Probably. He would need a lot of things to go his way. Max Duggan, I think, would need a Max Duggan situation where the rest of the team is good enough to cover up any potential mistakes that he made. The team as a whole just doesn't have a dude that's going to put the situation on his back and say, let's go, boys. And I think that's on both sides of the ball. Eric Gray had those moments where he was like, we're going to win. And it's going to be because I'm going to just run the ball so hard that there's no other way that there's no way that we can't win. I mean, the Baylor game, didn't he? Is that the game where he rushed for over 200 yards?
Eric Gray,
Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah, or no, he ran for a 106 and 2 touchdowns.
West Virginia.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah,
was the West Virginia game that
yeah, like
let
that
me double
game.
check. Yeah, 211.
Yeah, he tried to be the reason Oklahoma won, and the team wasn't able to put it together. Like it's literally just a couple of guys away from 9-3. I genuinely believe that. Now we'll see what happens with all the players. Like, will Dylan Gabriel come back? Will Marvin come back? Will CJ Colden come back? He's got his COVID year of eligibility left. Our from what we did real quick, just talking through the players' eligibility before we started recording. Um, Key Lawrence, I know he hasn't been a huge impact all year, but if he has any eligibility, is he coming back? Like, we need a lot of guys to return at key spots, especially where there's lack of depth. If Marvin Mims were to leave, I don't think it would be the biggest loss. Clearly, it would be way better if he stayed because at that point probably be, wide receiver 1A to Jalil's 1B next year rather than a 1 and 2. And then CJ coming back would be huge. But again, that's all going to be something that we all learn over the next few weeks leading up to the bowl game, more than likely, because some of them might not play in the bowl game. Some will. I mean, Braden Willis already said he will. So that'll probably be a tone setter for some of those guys on if they're going to play, but doesn't mean that they're guaranteed to play. Hopefully, this recruiting class will have an impact a little quicker than the last one. Not that these guys didn't do everything they could, but clearly this 23 class, the coaching staff has been preaching to them all year from what they're saying that they have an opportunity to play early. So the staff sees something in them that they're a little bit more ready to play year one than this 22 class was. Again, we'll see how true that is when they actually enroll. For the most part, they're all enrolling early, which is a good sign. We're not having to wait they're not having to wait for summer for the coaches to finally get a hold of them and see where they need to develop, especially develop their bodies. Because I don't care what state you play in or what level of high school football you play. For example, people have been anointing Jackson Arnold the hero, and that's fine. But the highest level of Texas football is not the highest level of college football, and it's not even close. It's like having 12 Jackson Arnolds at quarterbacks. It's the best of high school football is playing D1 Power 5 football. Like there is an adjustment period where they need to fill in their bodies, with muscle or uh, they need to learn the playbooks. Like they all need to, and it's just gonna see who's gonna adjust quicker. At the end of the day, this team for this year was 6-6 and weren't good enough to do much more than that. They were just again a few plays away from being a little better, but man, there's a lot of learning experiences here for the players, for the coaches, I think more so. And we're gonna, like you mentioned earlier, Brum, we're gonna talk about a couple of coaching positions that could be moved. But yesterday was not fun to watch. It was a good old Texas Tech Oklahoma shootout, like we've kind of gotten used to, because those guys will not just they won't stop. They're going to continuously try to just kill us every time.
So you're talking about the impact from the 23 class. I'll say, I think the 22 class will be primed to contribute as well. Being a whole year in, I'd like to see Gentry Williams get more of a run. They were keeping him back, and I know, coming off that torn ACL and everything else, he only played a handful of games. Gavin Sawchuk definitely redshirted this year, so he didn't even see the field, which he will definitely see the field next year. Devontae Barnes definitely had an impact. Spears Jennings played pretty well in the small spurts that he had. You had Kanik, who played, in good chunks. Kobe McKenzie could take the next step. And then you've got Kip Lewis, who, from what Brent Venables has said, has just been like a step away. Basically, he needs to put on a little more weight and learn the playbook a little bit. And now he's going to have this whole off season to get ready for that. And then you look at the offensive line. I mean, Jake Taylor, Jacob Sexton, Jaden Gibson didn't really contribute this year. Nicholas Anderson, Grayson Halton, Jaden Rowe. There's a lot of talent in this 22 class that probably has benefited from a year of playing a little bit here and there, strength and conditioning, learning the playbook, and they can come in and contribute. And then you bring in this 23 class and you have the top of the top contribute there. You bring in transfers. This whole team could look totally different next year. And I think that's what people need to realize, that, it's a process. It's strip it down and we're going to build it from the ground up. And I think that's what's happening right now. And it's not pretty. It's not fun. Don't get me wrong. I'm not excited that we went 6-6, and that's not Oklahoma football. At the end of the day, every program has to go through this. Even if you're the best, in one of the top programs. I mean, Ohio State was in disarray before Urban Meyer showed up. LSU was not doing great, and they definitely bounced back with Brian Kelly. So it takes some time. And I will pose this question to you. So looking at Oklahoma, they're 0-4 in one possession games this year. So hypothetically, if that all went OU's way, they would have been 10-2. They lost 4 games by a combined 13 points. So I will ask you, is that, and I think you already answered it, it's because Oklahoma just needs a few players. They are that close to being good. And at the end of the day, if Oklahoma would have beaten every single one of these teams by 3 points, the feeling on this season would be totally different, but the issues with this team would still be there. We would be talking totally different feelings right now, and we'd probably be going to a New Year's Six bowl, maybe even competing in the Big 12 championship game. I mean, at 10-2, we would be. The feeling around this team would be totally different. They're not that far, especially how much they lost. What do you think?
No, I agree. I mean, you look back, let's go through those losses, right? Kansas State. I think that's the one that if someone said, well, we were probably going to lose that regardless, fine. We'll take that L still. The Baylor game, right? That was the other one of the 3-point losses. Literally just mistakes were made during that game on the offensive side of the ball. That's the game, if I remember correctly, where Dylan had his slaughter of interceptions. Throw one less and you give an opportunity to score. West Virginia should have won that game.
Drops.
You don't drop a couple of those balls, extend the drives, score a few more points. And then yesterday, just get a couple more stops. And I think it's also on for the most part, the defense is to blame for the Tech game, but the offense definitely did not do its job to end the first half. I mean, the defense was getting stops. They just were not, the offense was not capitalizing with touchdowns. They were just getting either field goals and then the fake field goal attempt, which honestly, if you guys watch back, I know now that we're looking back at the game, people probably aren't going to believe me, but as that play was developing, and you see Schmidt's eyes, he's looking off to the sideline. He's looking at the defensive line to see if he's going to kill that fake or to let it run. That was kind of I don't know if the defense noticed it, but at least on TV, you could kind of notice that there was something that was going to happen, and maybe the defense did pick up on it. But if Braden Willis catches it, he could have gotten a touch, at least a first down, probably. He didn't. Again, a drop pass at the most inopportune time. But should they have just taken those 3 points? Like, you can make the argument either way, right? So it really is just a game of inches at this point. On, like you said, either Oklahoma's 10-2 or 9-3 or 6-6 like we are now.
Yeah, it's literally, it's razor thin. By playing at the highest level, it's razor thin, like you talked about. I mean, this is every player that's playing at, in Power 5 football is probably their best player at their high school. or one of the best players. I mean, it's a culmination of everyone that is the best of the best playing at this level. And Oklahoma, unfortunately, the depth was thin. At times was the coaching the best? Maybe not in decision making. And I will cut them some slack. Here's the deal: you've got Brent Venables as a first year head coach. I remember talking way back before the season started. I thought that there would be some growing pains of situational football and when to kick it, when to go for it, when to do these different things, when to call a timeout, because he's never had to make those decisions. And it's only way you can learn is just by doing it. And then Jeff Levy, I mean, playing at the highest level, he had Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin was heavily involved in whatever they were calling at Ole Miss. This is the first time Jeff Levy's had full reign at the highest level of college football. And you could see the issues there that maybe he needed someone with a little more experience, i.e. Cale Gundy. Cale Gundy would have probably been a huge mentor for him and provided a lot of stability and someone to go to as the co-offensive coordinator. Obviously, he's not here. And then you look, Chavis is a young guy. He's trying to figure it out. Ted Roof was just an analyst at Clemson. Granted, he's had a lot of experience, and you've got some younger guys. Jay Valai is kind of younger. Brandon Hall's younger. You got Coach B, who offensive line has looked pretty solid as you expected. So there's just growing pains not only with players but with the coaches as well. And I don't think all the coaches need to get fired. I don't think they're the issue. I think like I said earlier, you let this 22 class grow, you bring in the 23, you bring in a big transfer class, team looks totally different. And not that they're going to go 12-0 next year and win a national championship, because that's not my expectations for next year. But I guarantee you they are going to be much better next year. I guarantee that.
We will be bowl eligible a few games before the second to last game of the season. That I agree with.
I think that at worst next year, and I haven't even seen this, we haven't even seen all the transfers. I don't think 9-3 is out of the question next year for this team.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, and that also depends on what's Texas going to look like? Will Bijan come back? Probably not, but I mean, Texas fans are hoping. TCU, a lot of their experience is going to leave. Will they be able to keep it up with some of their youth coming in for 2023? I mean, a lot of teams are going to have to do the same restart Oklahoma's going through.
Yeah, and the best team is going to be Kansas State.
Yeah,
and there are a thorn in our side.
Does Deuce Vaughn come back? I know he's draft eligible now. The running backs, you don't want to take off. You don't want to take too many hits before getting to the pros, or they're just going to, kind of put you to the side. So, a lot of this is going to be dependent on what the other teams in the conference do, and then we'll have new teams join the conference. Luke Fickell might not even be the coach of Cincinnati, from what was reported this morning. So, I mean, we'll see. There's a lot of things. There are a lot of moving parts before next season, but I agree. Just looking at this team and what could have been, there's a good chance that 9-3 isn't a crazy thought for next year.
Yeah. And actually, what I didn't mention in the very beginning of the video that we should probably talk about is OU losing out on Anthony Evans, flipping to Georgia, because we, obviously didn't post because of Thanksgiving. I think that news broke, what was that, on Thursday or Friday? I can't remember when he exactly flipped, but it kind of came out of the blue. I mean, it's not totally shocking that OU lost out on him. 2023 4-star wide receiver from Converse, Texas, flipped to Georgia. OU Twitter was on full meltdown mode of, Anthony Evans announcing his flip, kind of coming out of the blue. It seemed like caught some of the other Sooner commits out off guard. He took a visit to Georgia to take his mom to the game, visiting family. He was very upfront. It seemed like he was very genuine, but sometimes when there's smoke, there's fire. And if you keep getting buzz every so often of him potentially flipping, eventually it's bound to happen. I mean, I don't think it's the end of the world. There's a lot worse positions. If OU would have lost it on like Derek LeBlanc, I would be really hitting the panic button, but they didn't. they're going to be able to go out and go get another 3 or 4 star, maybe, i.e., Micah Tees. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to lose a guy, and we've said it, if you're going to lose a guy at any position, the wide receiver position is the least concerning one. Not that it wouldn't have been nice to have Anthony Evans because he does have unreal speed, but you still have Jaquez Petaway, and you still have Keon Brown. Like the receivers are fine, and you have plenty of returning guys for next year. I don't. People were hating on Brandon Drum as if he's just withholding some sort of information. One, Brandon Drum is just reporting what is being told to him. He is not a mind reader. Two, he doesn't need to tell everyone everything. Like he doesn't. And that goes for Drum and that goes for every recruit. I don't know why people for some reason feel like they're owed some explanation for every decision that's made or every report that's put out by either the prospect or the reporter, but that's just not how the world works. The Anthony Evans can do whatever he wants with his decision. I mean, I think that's, I mean, just personally, even trying to be as unbiased as possible, it doesn't make any sense for a wide receiver to go to Georgia because they have not produced top level wide receivers in recent memory. I mean, Pickens is good, but was he amazing in college? I don't think anyone can really make an argument for that if you're unless you're a Georgia fan that's going to just die on that hill. But they none of them were like Alabama caliber, not even Oklahoma caliber over the last 5 years. We'll see what Oklahoma is over the upcoming 5 years, but the receivers looked at Oklahoma probably just as good, if not better, than the receivers that Georgia did this year. So I think that is really he. I mean, we ended up upsetting Georgia leading up in the moments of his initial commitment, and then he flipped back essentially to Georgia, where he was originally going to go. We pulled an upset, and then we got upset. It happens. It is recruiting. No, nothing is finalized until those pieces of paper are signed in December or February. So, I mean, hopefully Anthony enjoys his time at Georgia. Transfer portal is always open if he decides to not if it ends up not working out. Maybe it's a guy that Oklahoma will target down the road if that does happen. But I mean, good for him. At least he made a decision where he'll be happy going to school and closer to family. I mean, he mentioned it, assuming that he wasn't lying when he went to Georgia, like the first time, why he was in Athens and in the area, he was going to see family, and because I think it Trump said like his someone was going through some health issues and they were
Yeah.
going to all visit. So I mean that probably also plays big too. I mean heartstrings got pulled a little bit. You want to be a little closer to home as you were growing up because college isn't just a time where they get to play football. They're doing a lot of evolving as people. So I'm sure a lot of things played in a factor where Georgia just was the clear decision and it made no sense for it to be at Oklahoma.
And if he was on the fence anyway, obviously he was on the fence between Oklahoma and Georgia, leading into his first commitment. We can't sit here and act like the 6-6 season hasn't played a little bit of a factor into him and the way that the receivers have been playing in the quarterback play. Not that Stetson Bennett's been lighting the world on fire in Georgia, but Georgia's also 12-0, defending national champions. So if you're looking for reasons, as a commitment or as a player that's committed, and you start being like, oh, I mean, they're 6-6. I can go be, join Georgia, the defending national champions, and they've gone 24-0 in their last 2 seasons of regular season. So, it is what it is. Best of luck to him. And I do agree. I think it was a little insane the reaction about the reporters, Drum and the blowback that he got because of, what he was being reported. I mean, at the end of the day, what you're being told, you have to trust people. I mean, it's just like anything in this world. I mean, you have to take people's word for it, and you can't sit here and say, I don't believe you, because your source he's not going to talk to you anymore if you won't believe him and report what he says. I mean, that's just what's going to happen. I mean, if I were a player and I told the reporter, this is what I'm doing, this is why, and then that reporter goes and tweets or writes about it and says I'm lying, well, I'm done with you at that point. I mean, come on, we got to have some logical thinking, critical thinking skills, and just think about it. So anyway,
I mean,
uh,
there was a prime example earlier last week with some DJ Hicks stuff going on where literally some bridges were probably burned during that Twitter interaction that DJ had with some random guy.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's just is what it is. So moving on off that, best of luck to him. OU's going to be fine. Maybe go after Micah Tees. There's a couple other guys that they might offer or they already have offered. I know one's in teammates of Taylor Wine or yeah, Taylor Wine. I forget his last name, but there's a wide receiver there in the 23 class. I hope they get Micah Tees, but at the end of the day, they're going to get someone. And I mean, it is what it is. So moving on, just to talk a little bit about the coaching, obviously a lot of people were calling for Brent Venables and everyone to be fired, and that's not reasonable and logical either. But there is a legitimate talk or discussion that should be had at the wide receiver coach position. LaDainian Washington came in, young guy, came in and replaced Cale Gundy. A lot of people are wanting him to be removed and Malcolm Kelly to come back from TCU, come home, be the wide receivers coach for the Sooners. What do you think?
Look, I was telling you this before we started recording. From trying to look at this objectively, it makes no sense for Malcolm Kelly to come to Oklahoma unless Oklahoma is going to give him a clear upgrade in both title and a significant upgrade in salary, which I think Oklahoma can offer more than TCU. But everyone this season has been frustrated with the lack of experience from Levy in his decision making. Malcolm Kelly brings no more experience than what's already on staff. So it doesn't make too much sense for Oklahoma other than he played at Oklahoma and people love him. That's about it. There's no actual logical sense for either side to make that move. Because there's other wide receivers coaches that can bring in more experience. The two guys that I could think of were Mickey Joseph from Nebraska, didn't get hired as their head coach. If he gets brought back to their staff, I'm not sure if that's been confirmed or not. But if he's open to other opportunities, he was a wide receivers coach at LSU during their run where he helped develop Justin Jefferson, one of the best wide receivers that at that time in college, and is now one of the best receivers in the NFL. Jamar Chase, who was one of the best receivers in college at that time, and is now probably one of the best receivers in the NFL. And the Nebraska wide receivers did not look bad. That offense was actually pretty good. Outside of a few games, their wide receivers were decent. He would be a good guy to bring in. Brings in experience at coaching wide receivers. Brings in experience in planning offensive game plans. He was an OC. He was the interim head coach for Nebraska last year. That's a guy that can help Levy with game planning, decision making in real time, and coach his receivers. Another guy who's more familiar with Brent Venables is Jeff Scott. Was the co-OC at Clemson whenever they had Trevor Lawrence. They were setting records offensively for the university. He was a very good recruiter, recruited T. Higgins, who is teammates with Jamar Chase, is also a very good young receiver and was a very good receiver at the college level. Won national championships. There are other options other than Malcolm Kelly. I get the romanticism around wanting to bring in Malcolm, but it doesn't make sense. Again, if you're the fan that's frustrated with Levy's play calling and bad decision making, asking for someone that has less experience to come in and try to help that situation. It's better to bring in someone that's experienced, like a Jeff Scott or Mickey Joseph. I think Jeff Scott might be the more realistic target. If Mickey really wants to stay at Nebraska, and if we'll have him as the wide receivers coach and OC, because that's also his alma mater. But Jeff Scott just got fired from his head coaching job. Clemson, and even though they've struggled on the offensive side, they've had some flashes, and I don't think they're going to be firing their offensive coordinator anytime soon just to make room for him. So hopefully we go after Jeff Jeff Scott pretty hard and give him an opportunity to be like the co-offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach for a couple of years here with Levy.
I, I really like I like both those options. And I do agree with the take of maybe Malcolm Kelly doesn't add as much experience as those two guys would, because it's definitely a fair point. Um, Another one, I'm going to throw it out there. For some reason, I just feel like Cale Gundy's not done. Obviously, he's been gone from the team for the whole year. Some issues, went on in the summer leading up in the season and was dismissed. I don't really know the whole situation or whatever, but I feel like he's not rumored to go get another job really. I just feel like he's still around and might be a guy. Maybe he isn't the wide receivers coach. He might not be, but I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back as some sort of assistant at some point. And I know that what he said isn't right, and he's serving a punishment and everything else. But I just feel like that he's going to get a second chance, whether it's at Oklahoma or somewhere else. I would imagine he will be getting an opportunity to coach again. But I feel like Cale Gundy could come back. I have no report, no information of that. I just feel like outside looking in. But I like, Jeff Scott. I do think that's probably a good option for them, and probably the most realistic with the Clemson ties, because he was at South Florida and it was definitely not pretty down there. But maybe, not everyone's made to be a head coach. So that's why you got to have good, talented guys around you. But Mickey Joseph would be quite a hire as well. It's just a matter of, can you convince him?
Yeah, I think it's just really you got to bring someone in with experience at game planning for the offensive side and coaching wide receivers. Because not that LD did a terrible job, but there was definitely a difference between this year with him at the wide receiver coach position and last year when there was Kale. And yeah, there are different offensive game plans as well, but I do not think that drops are on the coaching. But I mean the route running wasn't amazing either. It's not like they were creating a ton of separation. I mean it was there's definitely guys that are, I think, just suitable options to both help the wide receivers develop and help Levy develop. And even if Levy at some point does get hired to go somewhere else, it would be easier to just have that co-offensive coordinator just shift into the permanent OC role and then elevate someone that's currently on staff, like a DeMarco Murray or a Coach Finley or Coach B if he wants to be an OC at some point. Like, bring them in as a co-OC, and then it's, the train of development that, as for coaches, like Nick Saban has at Alabama.
That's definitely fair. It's definitely something to be keeping an eye on. And, obviously, there's talks of Ted Roof and things like that. I don't think he's going to be let go. He might have a different, I guess, responsibilities. I just think that most of this defensive staff, I don't think much is going to change. I think they're going to keep the stability, and just figure out maybe different roles, different responsibilities, and figure it out. I mean, this was a growing year not only for the players, but for the coaches as well. I don't think you're going to be seeing people getting fired. And the Washington is probably the only one that might, be shifted around, or he might go elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. And it's tough to at this point really say like, oh, this guy's for sure gonna not move on. He'll leave or Oklahoma will remove him because no one did good enough or had like a long stretch of bad enough to be like, yeah, that guy's got to be canned. Like Ted Roof put together a few good games on the defensive side, where if you can just string together 10 of those and have two bad ones, it's really not that bad. So we'll see. If that does happen, obviously we'll talk about it. I just don't think it's right to probably, like some fans would want us to, talk about people getting canned.
No, I don't think so. So we'll move on. We'll recap our bets, and that'll be the show. So I had 8 bets this week. You had 8 as well, correct?
8 or 9.
You had 9, I think. So 9. I went 2-6 this week. Not great. So on the season, I'm 39, 37-1. And you went what?
7-2.
7-2. So what are you overall now?
52, 39-1.
On fire. On fire. Just going through, I'm just going to summarize mine. I had OU. Obviously, that didn't end well. I thought Notre Dame was going to be able to slow down USC. USC looks like they're on a mission. It hurts me to say that. Clemson looked bad. Baylor fell apart. Ohio State got ran over. Oregon fell apart. With Minnesota actually looked good and TCU looked good. Those were my 2 wins.
So my 2 losses were Oklahoma covering the 2 points. They fucking should have, but whatever. And then Iowa mine or under 38.5. Nebraska was a good enough offense to score a lot of points. So that's really the only reason I went over. My wins were Clemson, South Carolina, over 51.5. They scored a lot. Florida State, Florida, over 57.5. They also scored a lot. Nebraska plus 10.5. They whooped on Iowa. Ohio State and Michigan. That 57.5 line was way, or 58.5 line was way too easy. Again, out of the last 10 years, they've only scored less than 60 twice. So kind of give me there. Bama covered 22 at towards the end of the game there. Thank you, Bama. Over for the Iron Bowl. That one was nice because it was pretty much taken care of by halftime. The point total there was 49.5. I think if I remember correctly, it was like 31-14 or 34-14, something like that at halftime. So that was nice to not have to worry about that. It was just Bama covering. And then Texas Tech, Oklahoma over 63.5. A lot of points were scored. I really wish Oklahoma would have just been able to close it out in regulation, but and give me a almost perfect weekend, but maybe next year.
Get them next year. So, yeah. So into the regular season, we'll definitely be having a lot of recruiting updates. It's about to get really rolling, especially the transfer portal. Was it the 5th? I believe it opens up December 5th.
Yeah.
So a lot of moving parts about to happen. So do you have an individual challenge for the people or any final thoughts?
Let us know what you think about the team. Do you think that we are being homers and sunshine pumpers for saying that we really are just a couple players away from being 9-3, 10-2? Or do you think this team is absolute garbage and everyone should leave?
I bet we'll have a mix of both. So
Sure.
you made it this far, hit the subscribe button, turn the notification bell, like the video. Remember, when you like the video and you comment on the video, even if you already are subscribed, it helps us out a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, and Spotify. Everything's linked in the description below. And we will catch you guys later this week.